Alright, I just wanted to do a short review of the last video, just kind of talking instead of reading from my essay, because I think it'll be easier to explain. But I first thought of this model partly because of the tree rings, thinking about trees, and also, for whatever reason, I was fascinated with a wire mixing ball from one of those protein shake things. But basically, the y-axis is the Y machine. And you could imagine that as the source of reality, the reality generator. Whether you want to call that God, or whether that's a tool made by God in our reality, or however you want to view it. And these waves of time emanate from this central pole. And normal life, mundane life, where you don't notice any of these miracles or synchronicities, is this red ring in the center, furthest from the pole. So when you're traveling on the red ring, furthest from the pole, you don't notice the waves. You're too far away. And the only synchronicities you notice are the totally mundane ones, like your birthday each year, Christmas each year. But as some sort of synchronicity rogue wave of time, these blue arrows are like switching points. So if a wave of synchronicity happens to intersect with you at a switching point, at that point, you will jump tracks like a train switching to a higher or lower ring. And either way, you will grow in awareness, but you'll grow in awareness either up towards a spiritual orientation or down towards a materialist orientation. But either way, you're growing in closer to the center, getting closer to the source, but in opposite polarities. And what I was saying about like a symmetrical inversion, this mirrored wave, there's like a wave that's coming out from the center to the outside, and a wave coming from the outside into the center. But one wave is positively charged and one wave is negatively charged. So if you're positively charged, if you have a up positive orientation, then that wave is coming in towards the center is only going to pick up the positive particles, like a magnetic wave. It's only going to affect like particles. And the negative wave will only affect the negative polarity particles. But the way it's set up is, no matter what way you're traveling, everyone thinks they're moving closer to the center, closer to the true meaning, the core of meaning, or the core of reality, the center of reality. If you're oriented downwards materialistically, then to you, getting to the core of reality will mean complete control and complete prediction. This is the tunneling down into virtual environments, needing to make models and simulations to control everything and know exactly how everything's going to happen. Rather than in an upward orientation, you don't really care what happens physically. That's why I said treasure. Where is your pleasure? Where are you storing up your treasure? And if you're in an upward orientation, you're growing closer to the center, but up in rings, towards the up pole. So for you, reaching the core of meaning would be, finding God or enlightenment, or your heart or your consciousness developing to the next level. And I also think that's what all these science things are really about, because they really don't lie about anything. Like, I think obviously these lower level idiots lie, but the people they get their directions from don't lie. They say, yeah, gravity is an attraction between two massive entities. Evolution, yeah, that's where you come up out of the water and you grow legs and you can walk on land of your own volition. But I think that, yeah, Neil deGrasse Tyson and these guys lie. But the top guys, they don't lie. They just deceive, infer, and they let their underlings lie for them. So I'm sure you've seen this before. It's a mocking of the Jesus fish, where people have this bumper sticker where it's the fish representing Jesus, and they put feet on it and say Darwin. And they think they're so clever and funny. But if you think of this rather than applying to the physical world and hard nuts and bolts stuff, if you think of these things about consciousness, it's about your consciousness evolving, not your physical body. And not over millions of generations or lifetimes, but over one lifetime. And it's about your consciousness coming out of the water of time, the water of illusion, being drawn up out of the waters so you can see. And the same thing with gravity. Gravity, I think, is about consciousness, attention. Like I said, like in this model, if your attention is up, you're going to go up. If your attention is down towards physicality, you're going to go down. If your attention is on the synchronicities, you'll draw closer to the source of the synchronicities. If your attention is on the Lord, God, the spiritual realm, you'll draw closer to the spiritual realm. It's like your connection gets closer, your orbits get tighter, you get tighter and tighter related. You're drawn up through these rings, and with each ring you move up. You're still on the outside rings also, but you're just occupying more and more space in time or in synchronicity. And as you move up these rings closer to the source of synchronicity, you become aware of more and more subtle, rare cycles, rather than just your birthday or Christmas every year. It's like, oh wow, I'm in a depression right now. I know that means that I'll have a creative burst after this. Or I have some big difficulty. I know that means I'm going to come up on a new opportunity. Or whatever. You become aware of these more subtle cycles in time and in your consciousness. The closer you move to the y-axis, the Y machine, where these waves of time are emanating from. And it's hard to imagine acting across time. If you imagine like being younger or whatever, you don't know who you're going to be in the future, because you're always changing. From one year to the next, you're a completely different person. That's why I've always thought you can never fully know yourself. Like the engraving over the temple at Delphi, the Oracle of Delphi, says, "Know thyself." But how can you know yourself if you're always changing? But you see, that's when you are identifying with your persona rather than your seed of consciousness. You're identifying with the shell of all the stuff you accumulated. Like, you can imagine your spirit is like water, and it comes into this reality, and it's like rolling down a hill. It rains. The water, the pure water, falls down, and it rolls down this long mountain. That's your whole life, moving at a constant rate in time. You're rolling down the mountain, and while you roll down the mountain through your life, you pick up this shell of your persona, which is all the stuff you acquire from the world, your behaviors, your habits, and your identity. And it's like all this mud and dirt and grass and sticks and stones and shit that the water picks up. And you say, wow, this is me. I am the dirt. I am the sticks and rocks. But when you get to the bottom of the mountain, the end of your life, the sun evaporates the water, and the water comes back to where it came from, perfectly pure again. Nothing really ever touched it. When it evaporates from the light of the sun at the bottom of the mountain, death, all that dirt and debris, the shell, the persona it accumulated is left behind, and only the pure water returns, just like how it came in. I actually thought of that metaphor one day when I was in high school. I worked at a boat rental, a marina on a lake. And don't tell anyone, but I had eaten a psychedelic, and right in the morning, and it was a really laid back job, and right afterwards my mom called me and told me my grandfather had died that day, and it hadn't even hit me yet, and I was like, wow, I'm in for a rough day here. I just took this thing. But it actually turned out to be like one of the best dazed experiences of my life, and it was a big thunderstorm, and then it cleared up right away, and a rainbow in the sky, and I just saw this whole metaphor of like life is water. But anyway, so how could you act across time if you're dying every day and you're a different person all the time? Well, that's when you're identifying with your persona, with the shell, with the dirt and the grass and sticks and rocks. But once you realize that that's not you, that's just something you experience, and what is you is that seed, that core that God knew before you were in your mother, that was wrapped with physicality. It was only wrapped with physicality. It isn't the physicality. Once you realize that you're just this seed, this core that can never be changed, can never die, can never be touched, can never sin, and is always pure. Once you identify with that rather than the shell, then you can act across time. Because even before you identified with that, it was always there, even though you weren't really fully aware of it. So once you know that that is what you are, the unchanging, untouchable seed core, then that part can relate all across time because it's the same. Time can't change it. So then you're unified across time. Yes, you're never going to know your persona completely because it's not real. It doesn't exist. It's ever changing. It's not definite, and it's not you. But once you identify with that core, the seed, rather than the shell, the persona, then you are unified across time. And that's where you start growing inward in these rings. Once your attention is on that core rather than on your ego persona, you identify, connect more and more with that, more with the spiritual realm up. And also this model is similar to the Ouroboros, okay, where it looks like this. It looks like a perfect circle when you're looking straight down on it, but it's really this. The spiral, the circling the drain. It's the same thing. And like in Jeremiah, the pole serpent and the coiled serpent. The pole serpent is this source, the y-axis, the Y machine. And the coiled serpent are the loops, the rings, the time tracks we travel around. The mystery of a female shall encompass a male. And it's also similar to this model of the Teli in my early videos that I was showing from the Kabbalah stuff, which is supposed to be a map of the sky, an astrological map, but it also represents the spiritual world. And I would agree, but I think it represents, the spiritual world, but time as well, or motion through the spiritual world. And so, if you realize that time isn't real, and actually you're just going in an endless loop, and the only real motion is in the spiritual realm, either towards or away from God or from the source of the physical world. Once you realize that time isn't real, you're just going into a loop, and this core never changes. So here's the thing: people talk about past lives, and I don't think it's a lie. I don't think they're making it up. But what is a past life really, if time isn't real? there's just now. You're just going on this loop endlessly. So then all those past lives would really just be kind of tangential potentialities. They're all just infinite tessellations of the now. What now could be, what reality could be. But it isn't in the past or the future if time isn't real. They're just possibilities. They're just aspects of you. And in the same way of time not being real, I've always wondered, like I was talking to this channel, Woke and Truth, about this. She always comments on here. She's got a really great channel. If these things that we fear in the future, like this AI takeover meme, the AI nanotechnology takeover meme, the end of the world, all these things that we fear in the future, if time isn't real, then it's just something that we pass again and again. The end is the same as the beginning. And is that actually what already happened? The AI nanotech takeover. And I've wondered if all these things that don't seem to serve a purpose as far as consciousness, like mosquitoes, viruses, germs, fleas, bugs, bed bugs, all this stuff, parasites, and bad bacteria, maybe that is the AI nanotech. And from our memory wiped perspective, it's always existed. But is that really in the future is our past? That was the integration, the takeover of the nanotech, were all these negative aspects of reality, disease and pestilence and all this stuff. Did that already happen? And Woke and Truth was also talking about the glory of the Lord approaching. And is that what we're seeing, the things in the sky? And I've thought about this a lot as well, because I think of it as we're in like a tube in a well. And the sun is not an object, a ball up in the sky, but it's an opening. It's like, you can't behold the glory of the Lord. It's so bright, so intense, you couldn't even stand to look upon it, being in the presence of it. And it's like that's what's on the other side of the sun. Like the sun is just a pinhole, and God, the glory of the Lord, that light is on the other side of that. And all that's coming into this reality is just a little pinhole. And up higher in the well, before we descended down these levels through these simulations, virtual environments, in the beginning, the moon would have been like a perfect reflection, like a big mirror of the sun. So you have like a telescope or something. You have this little aperture, this little pinhole that the light of God is coming through into the well, and the sun is reflecting it perfectly up towards the top of the well. So it's day, and they're in a perfect cycle. So it's always light. And we can grow forever. There's no winter, no night, no darkness, no death, sickness, slowness, entropy. But as we needed to know why, we keep making it simpler, making simulations, virtual environments, and tunneling down. We got so far down that the light is not enough to reflect off the moon anymore. So now we're just seeing it's like dull surface and a little bit of reflection. Like, we can't go any lower or we'll completely lose the light of the sun. Like, we're at the bottom of the well. That's why we see the moon is not like the sun, because we're so far down. So is that with the sun becoming hotter and whiter and seeming to change? Also, I haven't seen the moon in like a month. It seems weird. It's been like a new moon, it seems like 3 weeks or something like that. I just saw it the other night. Crazy crescent, big red crescent coming back. But is that with the moon, the sun getting whiter and hotter? Is it like, are we approaching, coming actually closer now to God on the other side of that opening, which is the sun? He's getting closer and closer. It's getting brighter and brighter and hotter and hotter. Another thing I wanted to address was why I don't like to talk about current events or the news. And it's not because I don't think what's going on is important. I do. We're obviously in a severe crisis. I think we're coming to the the tipping point here, definitely. But the problem is if you watch current events, the news, the media, it's always a crisis. The world is always ending, whether it's North Korea or World War III with Iran or Ebola or the trade war, and they just all disappear. Like, you could turn on the news 20 years ago and we'd be right on the precipice of disaster. You can't turn away your attention for a minute or you'll miss it. The world's going to end. You could turn off the TV for 10 years, 5 years, come back. You'll be at exactly the same point. Crisis. Oh, the world's going to end any minute. You got to give it your full attention or you'll miss something important, but it's always like that. And if you have to talk about what they want you to talk about, I'd never finish a thought. People used to spend their whole lives working on a concept or a philosophy or a theology and spend years in the woods or alone in a monastery, contemplating it, meditating it, and writing and working. And you can't do that anymore. If you're always reacting to the next emergency, you'll never even finish a thought. You're just like a dog getting yanked back and forth on a leash. And the other thing is, I think most people listening to this have gotten to the point where you recognize that the news, the current events, the screen that is presented to us is wrong about literally everything. And not just wrong, a little off, but like opposite wrong. Completely wrong, completely inverted, okay? So if that set of information is completely wrong, if your actions are determined by that information, your actions are always going to be wrong. It's like war games, where you see all the missiles coming in that aren't really there. If you're reacting to that screen that the computer's showing you in war games, your actions are always going to be incorrect if they're based on incorrect information. So the only way that you can be sure you're acting correctly is to act completely independently of that information set. You have to completely disregard it. If you're reacting to wrong information, your actions will always be incorrect. If you're reacting to every piece of shit that comes flying at you from the north, east, west, or south, you're never going to find stability. You're never going to make progress. You're never going to know yourself if you're always reacting to what they're throwing at you. If you're reacting rather than being a prime mover, an independent actor, if you're reacting to wrong information, your actions will always be wrong. So that's why I try my best to never talk about the news or current events. I've also thought a lot about why I'm doing this. What is even the point? What's the point of making videos? Especially if it's not about any news or current events. Then because there's always the risk of just wanting to make videos out of ego and vanity and just wanting that dopamine hit of interaction on the internet. Especially because a lot of us don't have those strong connections in real life, in our physical life. Hopefully you do with at least one person or your wife or someone, but most of us don't. So it's really easy to get sucked in to imagining this virtual environment to be your real life, which it's not. This shouldn't be your focus, what is happening on the screen in this virtual environment. I don't want to build a brand, so I don't really want to get paid for it either. Just mostly it's still selfish, because I want to know why I'm doing it. I want to make sure I'm doing it for the right reason. And if I'm getting paid to do it, I don't trust myself to understand my intentions that clearly. Like, I might think I'm still doing it for the right reason, but maybe I just want money. You know, I don't want a brand. I want to present useful information. And I guess another reason is because, like I said, you're lonely. I want to interact with other people that are on a similar frequency as me. And I guess the real reason to do it is ultimately selfish, which is that I have to live here for now, and I don't want it to be torturous, awful. And I believe in some way that with my intention, I can change reality. I guess I believe that by making these videos, somehow I can actually change the reality through my input. I had a dream. It was actually in the middle of the day. I got done work. I was taking a nap on the couch, and I had this like midday dream. That it was like, the dream was pretty short, but there was a lot inferred from the dream, if you know what I mean. Like, sometimes you're in a situation in a dream, but you just kind of know all these other things about the state of the world. And what the dream was about was, it was sort of like now, it wasn't super advanced in the future, but everyone was very much more in their homes, and everyone had a kind of like, not super high tech, but kind of like a little booth VR setup area in their house, kind of like Ready Player One. And on my screen in my house, there was a video phone ringing. And I had extreme anxiety. I didn't want to answer it because the state of affairs in the world was, there was this lower court set up that was basically like a microaggressions court, like a hurt feelings court. And it was like unofficial under the regular court. And there weren't really cops like there are now. There was just this court where anyone could sue anyone for anything. Like, oh, I saw this guy, he picked his nose and touched the cereal at the grocery store, and I wanted that cereal. So you could sue anyone. Or they gave me a dirty look, or they called me sir, and I identify as a woman. You know, stuff like that. You could actually sue someone for it. And it was like a people's court, and it lasted a week. You had to go for like 6 days in a row. And you couldn't win that much money. Like, you would only get like $600 or $700 or something. Basically like a week's pay. And it was really long, but you couldn't not go to court. Like, if someone accused you, you had to go through the week-long court procedure, or else the real cops, some kind of Gestapo, federal police, would come and arrest you. So you had no choice. If you wanted to participate in society, you had to address these claims in this micro court, this microaggression court. And basically, it wasn't like robots took over all the jobs, so people didn't have anything to do anymore. It was more like it coincided with, as there was less and less to do, rather than entering this golden age where people could work on art and philosophy and be free to pursue higher things, higher learning and whatnot. It was like all their time just got wrapped up in petty bullshit, where people that were lazy and depressed and just angry people would basically make this their job, where they would just sue people repeatedly for hurting their feelings. And the people they sued would lose their jobs because you'd miss work for a week and get fired, but you couldn't not go to the micro court. So basically no one can get anything done anymore. And it coincides with the robots taking over all the work. And they act like you can do it to anyone, but of course you can't do it to like celebrities or politicians. But they'll act like you do. They'll have like fake court cases for them. But basically everyone's time just gets consumed in this petty micro court where you have to go to court for a week and, you know, they might get $600 or $700, but these really petty, miserable, lazy people would make that their whole life, just attacking productive, fruitful, happy people and just dragging them down to where nothing could get done in the world anymore. And everyone's just perpetually caught up in this microaggression feelings court, consuming all their time. Another thing I was thinking about related to this is, why do we like being scared? Why do people like being scared? Intense fear or love makes you highly alert. The more intense the emotion, the tighter the window of observation, definition, choice. The more now, the more choice. The more intense, more immediate the experience. The more present you are. Less time. The stronger the emotion, the less time. The stronger the emotion, the weaker the effect of time or experience of time. To where you approach maximum fear or maximum love, as you approach maximum fear, maximum love, the window of experience approaches zero, singularity. Your response to change in the environment approaches the event horizon, where you're responding simultaneously with changes in the environment, or before even. And suddenly, you're no longer responding to the changes in the environment, but you are seemingly creating the changes in the environment. Like swimming past the wave generator in the wave pool, past swimming up a waterfall and standing at the top and watching the barrels go over the edge, and reaching the control panel on the back side. So the period of intense love or fear, the period of extremely intense emotional presence, creates a timeless state. But as the emotion recedes, we are submerged back underwater, back into time. And once we are fully submerged in time again, and we look back at the period of timelessness, it can appear to have been a single moment that seemed to last forever or last for hours. Or conversely, the timeless period can appear to have occurred over many hours or days, but seem to only last a brief moment, pass in a flash. Or the intense emotional period can even seem like, looking back, as missing time, seem to be no time, missing from the linear timeline completely. So it stands to reason that the only way to escape time, physicality, in the causal chain is to completely open your heart to the most intense emotional experiences and accept and appreciate them fully, no matter what the emotion is. And it seems that whatever force shapes this reality, this society, conditions us to do the opposite, to become callous and hard in our hearts and always be suspicious and cautious of emotion, and to view it as a weakness in this scarcity competition matrix. And the more you harden your heart as a result of that conditioning, the less you experience emotional presence, the deeper you sink into illusion and time. And rather than freeing yourself from external control, by nullifying your emotion, you do the opposite. You become more and more perfectly controlled, deeper and deeper underwater. Because the feeling of events is the higher reality. When you can't feel those higher, more intense, transcendent levels of experience, all you are perceiving is the physical, the nuts and bolts. And since that is all you can perceive, the physical is all you can conceive of. So you are completely locked into the linear causal chain. And in that state, you have no control. You are simply a predestined domino in an infinite row of dominoes. If you ignore the higher levels of experience, you can't possibly operate from them. You can't rise up out of the water. You can never do anything unexpected. You can only operate from scarcity and fear in time, physicality. all your action is always dictated by the data set, externally, always reacting automatically, rather than acting from outside of time as a prime mover, an independent variable, actually affecting the stream rather than simply reacting to it. When you're underwater, you can't possibly see what's actually coming downstream. So, in order to escape time and physicality, loss and scarcity, our goal should be to experience emotions more and more fully, and to break down our conditioned resistance to emotion, to dissolve this shell of insensitivity that has built up and encrusted our heart. Even if it is intense fear, we shouldn't resist it. We shouldn't fear fear, or pure love, or anything in between. Because the truth is, it's a cycle. You can only stay in the air so long, like a dolphin jumping and diving cyclically. Inevitably, you will always return to the water. But by breaking down our conditioned resistance and dissolving the shell of insensitivity that has encrusted us, we become more aerodynamic, and we start building up speed. And the more the intensity of our emotional experience builds up, it's like building velocity. So that rather than spending most of our attention or experience underwater, with a brief hop out of the water, then diving very deeply again, and eventually just slowly, barely surfacing again for a moment, before sinking deep underwater again. Instead, we can build up so much velocity that we leap and soar high above the water, flying. We can build up so much velocity that we leap and soar high above the water, flying. And when we come back down, we come into the water at a very shallow angle. So we're like a dolphin traveling just under the surface, a bulge above the water. Just a thin skin of water covering us. So we can give a few more powerful thrusts of our tail to propel us even higher out of the water next time. So it's kind of like we're spinning up this cycle, faster and faster, until we're flying instead of swimming under the water. We're flying and just skimming the surface, like a skipping stone with no resistance. And the last thing I want to talk about here is, I always say I'm making art. You know, it's not really a scientific endeavor or anything like that. I consider all this, or research even, I consider it all to be art. And not just me, but all truther, quote-unquote truther videos, I consider to be a new art form, a type of art. And I was thinking about what exactly that art is, and how you would define it, and what is the value of that art. And I think it's information processing, InProc, information processing as an art form, where the medium is information directly. So the new style of art is overtly derivative, a sort of information media collage, where the message arises or is expressed in the relation between pieces of information, rather than in the pieces of information themselves. The medium is information. Okay, because now everyone has access to all the information. There's nothing new anymore. Because art used to be attempting to present a new piece of information. But now everyone has access to all the information. You can't present a new piece of information to anyone. So the value is no longer derived from presenting a novel piece of information, but rather a novel arrangement or juxtaposition of already existing information. suggesting a novel analogy between branches of information previously thought to be unrelated. And the success of a work of art in the medium of information processing may be measured by the extent to which a holistic revelation is understood to emerge from a novel juxtaposition of existing information by the artist. So the value of the piece of art, or the success of any piece of art in the information processing art form, the success is measured by the extent to which a new higher level metaphor or higher level understanding or analogy holistically for reality as a whole emerges from a novel arrangement of old information, presenting it in a new way, juxtaposing, collaging it in a new way, so that a higher level about reality itself emerges from the novel arrangement of information.